Welcome to the Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do podcast with your host, Tom Singer. In each episode, we explore the interesting lives of business leaders, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and others who have a healthy dose of the entrepreneurial spirit. It is time to explore something cool. Now, here is your host, Tom Singer.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do. Thank you so much for pulling your chair up to the Cool Kids table. As many of you know, if you're regular listeners, I started this show almost 5 years ago because I wanted access to really successful people who were doing cool things. Because I don't know a lot, but I do know that success leaves clues. And I will tell you what, when we get a chance to interview some of these people, like today's guests, and they tell us about their path, what they did, they always leave a nugget, an idea, a theory, and something inspiring along the way. And all of us can learn from that. So we are now up to episode number 463, and I am excited about this episode because today we have Ryan Spong, and Ryan is the founder of Foodee. He's also a Canadian. I love having the Canadians on the show because the stereotype is true. The Canadians are the nicest people on the planet. So Ryan, welcome to Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I'll start by saying something like, I'm sorry. Thank you very much for having me on.
So I don't really read the bios that the PR people send me. I like to let you sort of describe what is your business and what do you do. So tell us about Foodee.
Yeah, let me start by giving you a tiny bit of background, and I think that'll put it in context. I noticed that as I was reading through your bio, that we had a similar start to entrepreneurship. I too started as a busboy in a restaurant, and I don't know what it is about restaurants, but you do get sort of a take, I think, on customer service certainly and customer experience. But that began for me about an 8-year career in restaurants, I guess you'd call it, but basically just as a waiter and a caterer, putting myself through undergrad, that kind of thing. I graduated, I spent some time in finance that culminated in a more formal career, I guess, on Wall Street as an investment banker. But I've been in entrepreneurship for the last 12 years or so, and most of my companies to date have been bootstrapped. But the one that I still own that's bootstrapped is a group of restaurants. So, lo and behold, here I am, at 40 back in the restaurant game where it sort of, began for both of us. And that's kind of what led me to Foodee. I spent, half of my career in restaurants, half in corporate offices. And here I am, the CEO of Foodee, which is a business that bridges this world. So at Foodee, we're a software platform that allows corporate buyers, and this is admins and EAs and so forth, who buy food for large groups of people to manage that spend. So a good way to think about it would be more like DoorDash for business. So where that experience kind of falls apart in-app, let's say we're ordering on a Friday night on a food delivery app for 5 or 6 people, it starts to get pretty complicated. Our software is basically targeted at kind of 10 to 500 person groups where one person's responsible for coordinating all of that.
So what led you? You said you were in investment banking for a long time. I always find it interesting when somebody is sort of in an industry like that, where it's sort of, that's the top of the world. That's sort of the top of the food chain in business. I'm always amazed when people walk away from that. So what led you into this world of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think entrepreneurship, it's a calling, right? You either hear the call or you don't hear the call. And as a young man, I think I was probably didn't hear the call loudly enough, I would say. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur at some point in my life. I could hear the sort of faint ringing of that. When I graduated from undergrad, I got a job on a trading desk at a bank. So I was trading during sort of the internet 1.0 bubble. This is like 99, 2000, 2001. when everything came to a crashing halt in 2001, I went back to business school. And I thought at that point, that the call had gotten a little bit louder. I thought, I'm going to go to business school and I'm going to round out, strategy and marketing. I'm going to learn about how to become an entrepreneur. But what happens, if you're a certain type of person, and I'm kind of a type A personality, is you get around all these other type A personalities in business school, and you're either trying to become a consultant, and work at McKinsey, or you're trying to become an investment banker. And with my background in finance, I just went straight for those investment banking jobs. And before you knew it, I'd been recruited. I got a great job with a British bank, but down in New York. And I didn't think anything of it. I didn't have a second guess. It was the best job, literally, that came out of that school. And but what happens is, for me anyway, I'm 2.5, 3 years into that career, and I'm looking around, and I couldn't see anybody I wanted to be. It's just that simple. My boss was a great guy, but he had no life. He was working just as hard as I was. 100-hour weeks. And his boss was making more money and even working more hours, and nice people, but not the life that I wanted. And I think what you realize when you get to Wall Street too is that people are there to make money for its own sake. They want to be around it. They want to get some for themselves. The thing about entrepreneurship is that you can do something that you really, really like, that you're really passionate about, that you really enjoy, or that is really meaningful, values-based. And the money comes from that, but it's not the reason for it. It's the result of.
It's really interesting that you say that, because I spent a lot of my career with my ladder against the wrong wall. I was a corporate sales and marketing guy. I did well. I won awards. I won trips. I was moving the bottom line, for the company. And yet, at the same time, I just never felt really fulfilled. I never felt like I was doing what I wanted to do. And now the last 10 years, I've worked for myself, and I've just sort of developed my own thing. So my daughter went to undergrad at one of the top undergrad business schools in the United States, and her sophomore year, she had one of the guys she knew who was a little bit older was doing an internship in Austin, Texas. And so she was home for the summer. So she hung out with this guy, and we invited him. My daughter's boyfriend came down to visit, and they were all friends. And so we all went out to dinner. And later that night, my daughter texted me, and she said, "Justin said you're the most interesting person he's ever met." Now, my daughter can be a smart ass, right? So I thought there was like a follow-up line to that. And so like 10 minutes later, I'm like, and she goes, "No, that's what he said." And I said, "Why would he say that?" And she said, "Justin said you're the only person he's ever met who invented his own job." Which is really sort of what I did. I mean, I created my own job as a professional speaker and a corporate trainer. And I love what I do. I get to go in. It's different every time. Big companies, small companies, associations, and it's always different. And I feel so fulfilled. So when you were talking about looking around saying, I don't see anybody here that I want to be like, that's the way I felt in corporate America. So it really resonated with me.
That's such an interesting point that you mentioned. I think, and this might be a theme, when we talk about that distance between, potential and action. I think the thing that people think about entrepreneurship, or what paralyzes them, is this fear. And, one of the messages I wanted to get across today is just what you talked about, is that, people ask me, "Oh yeah, you're an entrepreneur. You've been an entrepreneur for 12 years. I've got 3 kids and 1 on the way in September."
Wow. Four kids. That's a lot of kids.
By the way, yeah, the fourth one was a surprise.
They know what causes that now, Ryan.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm going to take care of that cause, actually. Speaking of that, shortly after September. But having kids and having responsibility and mouths to feed and all that kind of stuff, I get the question sometimes from my buddies, don't you find it risky? You're sort of responsible for, and not even just your own paycheck, but all your employees and all this kind of stuff. But like your story that you just told about creating your own job, I think entrepreneurship's actually not that risky in that regard, because I'm 43 and I think about being, in my late 40s, my early 50s, and being in some massive organization where whoever is stewarding the thing at the top makes some bad decisions and they have to cull 20%. Well, the guy with the, mid 6-figure job, who's 50 something, he's right at the front of the line for losing that job and having to rebuild. But when you're an entrepreneur, the cool thing about it is that you have successes and you'll have failures, but you have a playbook that makes you able to go out and create anything you want. You will always, always have a job.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what happened to me. I got laid off on April 1st, 2009. And first of all, the irony of being laid off on April 1st has never been lost on me. But second of all, April 2009 was the bottom of the Great Recession. I mean, there were no jobs. That was the worst of the worst. And I just decided that was it. My boss called 50% of her company off the payroll that day, and I was part of it. And that was fine. She saved the company. It's bigger than ever, and she has continued to do well, but it didn't help my situation. And so I decided on that day, I didn't have to make the big giant salary. I just needed to get by, and I needed to be fulfilled. And so I was 42 when I started. Somewhere around 50, I decided, you know what, I can make this more fun. And at 50, I decided I was going to make age 50 to 75 the best years of my life. And I've just started saying yes to things. And I do have down years, and I do have times where I think, what am I doing? I'd be better off back as a corporate marketing director. And yet, at the same time, I'm happier and more fulfilled than I've ever been. So you've been doing this for a long time now. What is it that you love about entrepreneurship?
Oh God, there's so many things. I think one of the things that you get with entrepreneurship that you don't get with other careers, I think, is that every aspect of your life and every job that you've ever had comes to bear. So, if you decide to take the leap into entrepreneurship and you start following that path, it's really a snowball going down the hill. And I'll give you an example. My first job out of undergrad, it was in the stock brokerage, but my first job there was in the call center. So I had the headset, I had the whole script. Thank you for calling, blah blah blah, getting paid $9 an hour or whatever it was. It was actually, I got it through a temp agency because I have an English lit undergrad. So
which English lit, finance, same thing.
Yeah. Quick digression. I remember my dad, who's an operations management guy, came to my English lit undergrad ceremony and he shook my hand and said, congratulations, super proud of you. Well, what are you going to do for a job? And I remember thinking, oh yeah, right. I got to get a job.
The job. Yeah. So my oldest daughter just graduated from Carnegie Mellon University, and she has a degree in business administration and a double degree in history. And I think it's great because she loves history, and she decided she was going to minor in it just because she loved it. And the head of the history department said, it's like 2 or 3 more classes, and you can make it your second major. And one of those classes was the history of business, so she could get double credit for it. And so it was really only 2 extra classes. And what's so funny is that, all my friends are like, why did she get a minor in history? As if somehow that was horrible. I think it's the greatest thing in the world. If you love something, put it in there, work it in.
Yeah, the English lit base. I kind of, was a early 20s kind of moment where I had this Dead Poets Society type teacher who was
Captain, my captain.
Yeah, exactly. You should switch. I was in physics. I switched over to English lit. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. But I do find that base is helpful in business, like the written word. How much communicating you do in business. It's basically the only thing I do all day. I still go back to English language classes just to tighten up emails, all the way back. Anyway, so point is, when I was in that call center job at the bank, I thought, oh man, this is the worst. After a few months, and I never thought I'd have to draw on that experience again. It was another 15 years or so before I became an entrepreneur. And of course, the first thing that we had to do at Foodee was set up our customer service system, right? So I'm drawing back to those days, looking at headsets and how those stations were set up and all that kind of stuff. So I think one of the things that I love about entrepreneurship is if you're listening, and you started the hour by saying, people drop clues. Those clues are everywhere and can positively impact your business. The second thing, and this is I think the most important when you get to having more stakeholders in your lives, like wives and children and all this kind of stuff, is that entrepreneurship can completely strengthen those other aspects of your life. One thing I remember when I had more of a job was that I could, when I left the office, you leave it there, and then that's just all that work stuff, and you're home with your friends and you're home with your family or whatever, and they're totally separate. Entrepreneurship never sleeps, right? So you're going to be, when you're building your business, and for those entrepreneurs that are listening, Sunday morning, Sunday at soccer, you're hoping that your kid doesn't look at you while you're on your on your handheld when they score the goal, because you're working the whole time. But the cool thing about it is that they don't have to be separate. If you choose and work on entrepreneurship that enriches your life, you can bring that into the other aspects of your life. And I'll just give you a quick example of that, and then we'll move on. But so, we wanted to buy a vacation property, right? Somewhere to go, get the kids out of the city. And so we bought this farm. And, I haven't talked about it, but the way that I got into Foodee was by owning this group of restaurants. And so, the farm, we've planted a crop that we're teaching the kids how to farm because they're city slickers. Mm-hmm. We're teaching them about the growing cycle. We're teaching them where food comes, all that kind of stuff. It's a vacation place, but it's also something that's being sold into our restaurants. And it's, I think it's a good story that kind of furthers that business of ours. So entrepreneurship, I think, can enrich other aspects of your life.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my kids have, grown up with this, they're teenagers and in their early 20s, but they've grown up with me doing this now for over a decade. And, my daughter, her fiance is a PhD student, and she graduated with a great degree, but she didn't want to go work 60 hours a week at a bank, because he's still a student for the next few years, and he's getting a degree in advanced mathematics, but, he still has a little bit of flexibility in his day. And so she wanted to be able to live life with her fiance. And she basically said, you know what, I think I can create my own path. And so she's a fitness trainer. She's all into helping women get strong and learn how to eat right. And so she does online fitness coaching. And then in addition to that, she's helping entrepreneurs like other speakers and other solopreneurs who I know doing project work for them. So she's, helping people scrub lists. She's doing website reviews. She's doing some light video editing. And all of a sudden she's figuring out a way on how to piece together a life that she can build the way she wants. And she's like, look, you and mom did it. And so it's like, in a way, I think that's awesome. And people, I've had people say, well, wait a minute, she graduated this degree, you should make her go get a Wall Street job. And I'm like, I don't think that's what we're here for at this point.
Yeah, that's another great point too. I think that probably the biggest one, and if I'm being completely frank, the thing that pushed me the most is that you get to be your own boss. And that's twofold. Number one is that you get to make decisions. Now that's also / you have to make decisions, and of course,
and sometimes you make bad decisions. I can attest to that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, sometimes you're making bad decisions. In always you're making them with imperfect information and hopefully as much of a fraction, as you can. So sometimes you're making bad decisions, but aside from being your own boss, which is the obvious one, you also get to take all of your experiences from before and decide to create the kind of company that you want. If you're an entrepreneur, and in both my companies, I've got, lots of employees. And so, I think about the kind of company that I want to work at and the kind of company I wanted to work at when I was a young person. And you get to make those decisions and create, a lot of those rules. So as an example, at Foodee, we allow remote work. So, Tuesdays and Thursdays, everybody works from home. We're based in WeWorks all around the country.
Nice.
But we also, we want people to, and especially high performers, to feel like they can work from home. Because, that was the worst part of investment banking was FaceTime. If you're the bottom rung, you are leaving between midnight and 2 a.m, and you have to be back at your desk at 6:45. So, the FaceTime was the most asinine thing because your amount of work, was low, but the amount of like drain on your resources was high. I wanted to flip that up at Foodee. And the cool thing about remote work, I'll just touch on real quick, is I think about, the five senses or whatever. If somebody loses a sense, there's that expression, and I have all my senses, I think. So I can't confirm this, but that the other senses, are increased, right? Mm-hmm. So I think of FaceTime as vision, right? So if you're seeing somebody sitting at your desk, you're equating that with work. And as soon as you take that away, it's like taking sight away. Now all you have are your other senses. And at work, as people probably know, that's results. So, without seeing people at their desk, it's a much easier conversation. It's like, hey, these KPIs are here, these numbers are here. I don't know how much you're working, but I know that you're not getting it done, or I know that you're getting it done.
Well,
right?
so many people today hide behind the word busy, right? How often do you run into somebody and you say, hey, how are you? And the first words out of their mouth is, oh my God, I'm so busy, which I've kind of put together with a lot of people are trying to prove to somebody, maybe themselves, that if they're busier than us, they're better than us or somehow. So, I think just because someone's doing busy work or having that, sitting at their desk doesn't mean they're actually getting results.
No, I think that's a really important distinction for sure. And as an ex-investment banker, I have to say I didn't just wake up with this. It took me a long time to kind of grind that out of me, that habit. But we've been at it for about a year here at Foodee, and I think the staff has never been happier. Results have never been better.
So Ryan, what advice do you have for somebody who maybe they're an investment banker, maybe they're doing any number of things, but they want to, like I said, they have their ladder against the wrong wall, or like you said, it was a calling inside of you. What advice do you have for somebody who wants to go down the entrepreneurship path? Yeah,
I think, there's probably one piece of advice that I've learned the hard way, and then had success sort of following this after. So that piece of advice is become a domain expert. So people may be interested in things, and I'd love to start a winery, or I'd love to start X business that they like, but they know very little about, and they haven't come up in it. And so we may touch on this again, later, but that from idea to kind of action to success piece gets stopped there because, people think, well, I would like to do this thing, but then very quickly realize I have no idea how to do it. Right. And so that becomes a bit of a blocker, and so I'll give you my example first. So I had a big failure when I got into entrepreneurship. My second company, the first company I started and had an exit for a modest outcome. The second one I started a prefab manufacturing company. Okay, so the first business was in construction, made the jump and leased this massive warehouse. And my partner was an architect. He had done some prefab work. We had some jobs from him that were going to be sort of our lead orders in the factory. And these would be like if you read Dwell magazine or Wallpaper, these kind of modernist prefab. This is not like a shed or whatever. We're building big houses, 6, 7. Our biggest house was 9,000 square feet, modernist compounds with these sort of building blocks. In any case, got into this business, and at the 3-year mark, things unraveled. Couple problems, and without getting into the nitty gritty, had to close the business down at the 3-year mark. Almost went bankrupt. Literally, everything I had to sell my all my assets to make ends meet. So this was either a devastating moment for an entrepreneur or a very rich learning experience, and this has proved to be fertile ground for me ever since. And a lot of the lessons and stories I talk about or I use when I'm making decisions come from this massive failure. I had to lay off 150 people. I made sure everybody was paid, didn't go bankrupt. The last check that cut was the same month that my first son was born. So it's in a really tough place as an entrepreneur, because that's when you really say, well, maybe I should just get a job, right? And I remember saying to my wife, I'm just going to become a handyman. Like a 34, ex-investment banker, broke entrepreneur. Just like, I'm done. And my wife, she's a super supportive woman and always has been. And in those moments, was sending me sort of these inspirational entrepreneurship quotes and stories of successful folks that had failures. And at the time, it's really difficult to listen. But in any case, I did get back on the horse, and that's another story. But the reason why, if I go back, the fundamental reason why that business failed is because I wasn't a domain expert. I had not had a failure to date. I had gone through a successful finance career. I'd had a successful outcome. I thought I could do anything. So become a domain expert. There are so many little things, little decisions that can take you off course. There, of course, are huge ones that will take you off course, but 1,000 little ones. And if you're not a domain expert, you'll just have no playbook. So when I'm getting asked, how do I start this business? My first question is, have you done this, right? Like, have you had a job in this? Like, go and, work in this sector, because somebody else can pay for those mistakes that you're making while you're learning. My partner and I have an expression that wisdom's expensive, and it's better to borrow than to pay full price. And so you can do that if you're working in that business for a long time. Of course, the other piece of advice, and it's related, is don't be an island. So the other real big contributing factor to that failure that I talked about is that I thought I knew everything, and I never had anybody around that was going to give me any advice. Okay, so I was alone. I was making these decisions. I was inexperienced, but I was also not asking people what they thought. And before you knew it, I was over my skis. So this kind of village of gurus idea that people talk about, that's a big thing for us at Foodee. We've got an incredible board of directors, but we've also got lots of great advisors that we can lean on when we're thinking about how to make decisions.
So that's kind of a transition into the next question. So I love to ask the people who come on the show about this, because one of the things that I do is I go in and I work with companies and teams, and we talk about what I call the paradox of potential. Because, Ryan, we get really excited when we start a company, we have so much potential, or we hire a new person. We hire Becky and we think, oh my God, she is going to transform this business. And then a year later, we're transitioning Becky out of the company. Well, how come? There was potential. Why didn't she work out? Well, because potential does not equal results. There is a gap between potential and performance and results. And so I love to ask the entrepreneurs who come on this show, why do you think, obviously, having been an entrepreneur for almost a decade, you've seen people come and go. Why do you think some people get farther across that gap between potential and performance, and other people fall into the abyss?
Well, when I think about employees and what so let me start by saying that if you've got somebody on your team that's not living up to your potential, the team lead, has done one of two things wrong, right? So you've either hired poorly, or you haven't given them all the tools they need to be successful. But either way, it very rarely comes down to that person, right? Because so when we're hiring, I have sort of this acronym, and I want to make sure that people that join my team have game. Okay, so GAME. That's how I remember what I'm looking for. But all of my questions in my interviews tend to follow a path towards these four things. So one is that you're looking for people that are goal oriented. Okay, and that's obvious. You get lots of people talking about that, but show me a time when you've set a goal for yourself and you've gone to achieve it, right? Not dreaming, I would like to do this, I thought about that. Show me a time where you did it, right? And so that's why I think people are enamored with other aspects other than work. I climbed, Mount Everest. That is a very good indication that you've got somebody who can put one foot in front of the other, literally. So A is accountability. And I think accountability in work is the same in life. These are fundamental things that your parents taught you, that your friends taught you, that you developed internally, and these are things that cannot be taught. So are folks in interviews talking about I or we? They're talking about successes like they own them or not, and that's a really easy one to test for. M is mindset. So I think growth mindset is a massive. Let's call it like a steepener in terms of like trajectory, right? If you've got somebody that's a lifelong learner, and I noted in your bio that you were a couch potato, Tom, but now you take every opportunity you can to learn. You can see it in people's eyes, and you can ask them, questions about their personal life again to figure out whether or not these are lifelong learners or whether these people have a fixed mindset. Right? How much TV is this person watching? Okay, and then the final one is empathy. So E is for empathy, and I love the book Radical Candor. That's sort of a book that one of my employees sent me and said, "Hey, this is how you lead. You should read this book." So that was cool. Reading through it, I found myself nodding and agreeing because I think that's how I like to think of it. But you cannot have a teammate, you cannot have a leader that does not have empathy. And I'm not talking about, tears and all the rest of it. I'm talking about people that take a genuine interest in others, that listen actively, and don't have the blinders on. So that's the hiring piece, Tom. I think the other piece is how you lead. And that expression, people join companies and leave managers. I've seen that, dozens, if not hundreds of times now. If you have a great manager, one that supports and lives those four values, pulls that out in people, you have people reach their potential. You have people that don't do those things, that feel stuck, and just watch them level off. All right.
Well, and I think that ties into what I've discovered. I mean, I've surveyed over 500 people. I've interviewed hundreds more. And I think all of this to get people across that gap from potential to performance falls into three buckets. And it really is the same stuff you said. It's plans, passion, and people. And the way I describe it is if you don't have plans or you talked about goals, then you're just going through the motions. You got to, as a company, as a team, and as an individual, you have to know what you're doing and why. And the second bucket then is passion. I always tell people if you don't like what you do, go do something else because you're never going to reach, the best you can be if you're just miserable about it. I mean, I found that in my own life when I was in jobs that weren't really fulfilling. I mean, I was good, but I never really jumped to great. And then the last bucket is people and everything that goes around that. And that goes to the empathy, it goes to how you relate, it goes to your network, it goes to the reputation that you build. And the old adage that people do business with people they know, like, and trust. You were talking about people leave managers. I mean, it's true for clients, it's true for employees. We're in a world where the cliche of people doing business with people they know, like, and trust, it's more true than ever because it used to be to get to know you, Ryan, was a process. And along the way, like and trust would come along or it wouldn't, but there was a process involved. Now we're all trying to fast forward. We're all into likes, links, shares, and follows. And somebody listens to this podcast and they're like, oh, I know Ryan Spong. Well, no, they don't. They know a 35-minute conversation that you had, with some yo-ho podcaster. And so we all think we know people because we now have access like we've never had. So I joke that the definition of the word know has changed to know of or know about. And so it's harder to get to like and trust. But when it happens, it's more powerful than ever. And I think that sort of goes in simpatico with what you were saying.
Yeah, the no part I haven't spent a ton of time on. So I really like your take there. The like and trust piece, I was, as I'm kind of, as entrepreneurs, you're going to take stuff with you. And one of my sales leaders on the Foodee team and a friend of mine said, salespeople will work for you if they like you. And in sales particularly, I can see that, it's a very kind of outgoing, gregarious kind of thing. And I took that a little bit further. And I think leadership in general is two things. One is, for me, is like and the other is trust. But in like, I break it out into two things. One is that they have fun coming to work, right? So they like you, they enjoy their time, like it's fun, whatever that means for people. And that could be in a bunch of different things. But also that they respect the person that you are. They like the man or woman that they are following. And they become sort of almost mentors through that initial attraction. Like the other piece around trust is also, I break it into two things. On the trust side, they want to trust that you can do your job. They're looking at their leadership. They're saying, okay, I trust these guys to get it done. But the other piece of trust too is that they trust you with their career trajectory. So, I think of companies as really being employment is really being a contract. Obviously, there is an employment contract, but more of an unspoken one where you say, okay, I'm going to sign up. I'm going to build this company with you. And in return, I'm going to leave this company better than I came in. And so if you have trust from your team that they're going to be better for knowing you, they're going to be better for having spent a period of their career with you, and they're going to be on a steeper trajectory or the right trajectory, whatever that goes, then you've kind of got that leaving managers problem licked.
No, I think you're right. I'm sitting here nodding because I'm thinking that was very profound, and I need to when I'm promoting this podcast, I need to tell people to go back to minute 37. The profound stuff was all in minute 36, minute 37. So, Ryan, I've actually got a couple more questions for you, but before we get to the last questions, I've got to thank the sponsor of this episode. So this episode is brought to you by Podfly Productions. Podfly takes the time, and the headache out of creating your own podcast. They set you up with the right equipment, training, and guidance to ensure that you're going to sound amazing. Podfly does all the heavy lifting and the technical work so that you can focus on creating great content, growing your audience, and interviewing really cool people like Ryan Spong. Hey, if you want to start a podcast, and I know some of you do, jump over to podfly.net/coolthings and check out the special offer that they have for the listeners of this show. So, Ryan, I call this show Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do. What's the coolest things you're doing with Foodee right now?
Yeah, so, I think the nice thing about Foodee is that it's a software platform. So when we started Foodee 5 years ago, we were actually driving food around, right? So we'd have a $200, $300, $400 order for corporate, catering, and our drivers would actually show up at restaurants. So we match restaurants and corporate caterers. But flash forward 5 or 6 years here, and that kind of final mile logistics piece has really been solved. You can't walk down a city street in North America without seeing the gig economy workers, with backpacks of one company and a hat of another company and a T-shirt of a third company delivering food and everything that we could possibly want. So over the last year or so, we've built integrations that have allowed us to tie into that logistics. So I think of that final mile logistics as almost being the same kind of wave that we felt in the late 90s around e-commerce and the internet. Can you build a business on the back of this ASAP delivery web? So I really like that we've done that. That's allowing us to service clients around North America. We're able to follow our clients now rather than expand geographically. The other thing I think that is really exciting about it is that we're using AI now in order to pair restaurants with clients. So you can imagine that if you're an EA and you're trying to feed 500 people every single day, and this is becoming kind of de rigueur in the modern economy, lunch is provided as part of your contract, work employment contract. You have a big problem on your hands. You have to solve for 10 vegan diets, 10 vegetarian. The modern office has keto and dairy-free and gluten-free and whatever nightshade allergy and all of these things in a 500-person group. Now you have to solve for budget, right? You and I get a $12 budget, and the CEO gets a $20 budget. If you're trying to pair that with restaurants and you're trying to also solve for variety, you have just a massive problem on your hands. And in a given city, we have hundreds of these meal program clients and hundreds of restaurants that want to service them. And keep in mind too, Tom, that when we give a restaurant an order, this typically will shut them down. They can't receive another order because this could be a $500 or $600 order, right? We are using now advanced AI to solve for this problem across North America. So I think between those two things, we've got a hyper-scalable model. And, one of the things we're thinking about right now is our next fundraise in order to pour some gas in the tank. We are not only profitable on a unit economic basis, per order, we're profitable on a per city basis, and now we're profitable as an entire company. So we're ready for the next stage.
That's awesome. And as you explode and Foodee becomes a household name, I get to say he was here on Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do when nobody had heard of Foodee. So that's awesome.
That's great.
So I love to ask the people who come on this show who they admire, who are entrepreneurs. Out there in the big entrepreneur sphere, who do you see where you think, hey, he or she, they're doing cool stuff? And here's the reason I ask the question. Because we live in this world where it's, hey, look at me, look at me. But I think great entrepreneurs, I think they're observers. So I think when we can get entrepreneurs to say, here's who I admire and why, I think it causes all of us to stop and learn. So who do you admire?
I was thinking about that before I came on, and there's a bit of a conundrum, I think, with answering. It's a great question. I was listening to Kanye yesterday, and there's a Jay-Z rap in there, and it's a common expression, but something like die young enough to be a hero, or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And I think the thing about all the entrepreneurs that we know, that I could say here that people would know, is that past a certain stage, companies are big enough that how they're known is sort of more of a caricature, and it's around the success and the size of it. So if I was to say Elon Musk, which you and I talked about, what made him successful to begin with is completely lost, I think. Now he's sort of a caricature. I think he's famous, and there is this same thing happening with entrepreneurs that happened with chefs, this sort of rise of the celebrity CEO. So I think this is a long way to say that my idols or my people that influence me the most in entrepreneurship are not known. Mm-hmm. I have a great community here in Vancouver, tech folks, that I refer to this village of gurus, but I'll boil it down to a couple. Number one, I think, and what gave me the entrepreneurial bug was my grandfather. So a guy who got drafted into the Second World War as a radio man, showed a lot of skill there, and then when he was after the war, started a radio repair shop that then turned into kind of like a record store and stereo store, that kind of early Sam the Record Man or Tower Records kind of a vibe, and built it to 3. But I think, he's the guy who gave me the bug for entrepreneurship. Right? He was successful. He was a man of honor. He lived the same life outside of the walls of his business that he did in, and he did incredibly well. Number two, I think, is a partner that I have now, and this is an entrepreneur who's taught me a bunch of stuff. But I think the one big takeaway that I've had is that the world does not need more crap. What you need to, if you want to do this, you have to provide value, and that was a kind of founding tenet of Foodee. Right. And so if you think about 6 years ago, we were getting at the restaurant asked to join a lot of these consumer apps. And the problem with that is that consumer orders, which are $40 and they charge 30%, for the delivery, right? It's a very kind of usurious kind of agreement, but that's not valuable to a restaurateur because those orders are coming in at peak time. We're already busy. We've already got full paying customers coming in, regulars usually that want a good experience. So we never joined a consumer delivery app. And I think in in really saturated markets, you're seeing that people are just ordering and not coming into restaurants, and there's just 30% out of these folks' bottom line, and that's an impossible model to get to for a restaurant. But in any case, at Foodee, we're giving folks these large orders, and they're happening before the lunch rush. So, if you want to make a $500 order at a restaurant, you have to make it at 10:45. We have to pick it up at 11:45 and get it to where it's going. So now your restaurant's busy from 10:45 to 11:45, and you just added a new rush. You're adding, you're not cannibalizing walk-in traffic because the economic buyer is the company, right? And your company is never walking in anyway. So consumers are still free to have their full price meal, right? So by doubling that demand curve, you're providing real value. And the thing that I'm really excited about with our business is that restaurateurs absolutely love us, right? We're making these businesses robust. And that comes from my partner, who said, like, hey, listen, don't put more crap into the world. And it's a maxim I've lived by.
I'm actually impressed that, there's all those apps. You looked at it and you pivoted. So many people look at them and copy them. And so I'm sitting here nodding going, that was an ingenious way to sort of take something that others were doing and make it a win-win for everybody involved. So my hat off to you, Ryan. Thank you.
Yeah, my the other side of that equation is the office admin or the EA. And I worked in offices for a long time. I had EAs. It is a thankless job. It is a job that all the crap falls to, the stuff that nobody else wants to do, and I know this because I had them, but also my mother was an executive assistant in EA for pretty much her whole career, and having good bosses and having bad bosses maybe makes the difference. But in general, I think that's a really tough job that people don't celebrate. And, we have an expression at Foodee internally, which is turn the office admin into the office hero. We really want to celebrate them. So I think if you can find business models that provide real value to your stakeholders, the rest is icing.
So Ryan, the last question I ask everybody who comes on the show is what do you do to give back to the greater good? Because I think if we're fortunate, and I think if you get to be an entrepreneur, really, we are fortunate, you have to find some way to give back. And everybody does it in different ways. So what do you do?
I've had this thought a lot about volunteerism, and there's sort of this spectrum, I think, when you think about giving back. And on the one side, it's physically yourself showing up and volunteering, which I've done and certainly did as a kid. And even at Foodee, we have a program internally where we go and serve food at the Union Gospel Mission. That hands-on approach, I think, is an important part of giving back. At the other end of the spectrum, I think, is donating money, right? Like, if you're a multi-billionaire, and we've seen really inspirational stuff coming out of things like the Gates Foundation, obviously, and how much leverage you can get. Of course, we are not all billionaires, and we are not all able to give a lot of money. But if you don't have the money to donate, which I do some charitable donations, I think a good mix is finding not-for-profit work. And so I'm pretty active in the not-for-profit side. I've founded Street Food Vancouver. I currently, then I transitioned to working at Loco BC, which is a local business community. Now I sit on the Knives and Forks Investment Co-op, which is a not-for-profit co-op investment arm of a credit union here in town that invests in local food businesses. And I'm also involved with the Vancouver Outsider Arts Festival. So, this is a way to give back, I think, and provide a fair bit of leverage. If you can sit on a board or, ask a board, if you're not being asked to join the board, if you can ask the board, if you can be on a committee for the board, there's good ways for entrepreneurs to use their skill set and leverage it at the not-for-profit level, because by and large, not-for-profits, don't have a ton of for-profit experience on the board, and they're looking for it. So entrepreneurs can get involved that way, I think, and create a lot of change, positive change.
I think that's awesome, and cheers to you for doing all that stuff. I think that's great. I love to hear these stories of what people do and places they've served, money they've given, and ways they've impacted their community. So cheers. Hey, Ryan, if somebody's listening to this and they're like, I got to know more about this guy, or we've got to find out about Foodee, and is it in our community? How do people find you?
Yeah, I think the easiest way is to go on the website, www.food.ee. You can see everything you need there. Of course, you can follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram as well.
Nice. Well,
and if you're at the right place, if you see the little red fox.
Little red fox looking for Foodee. Awesome. Well, I'll go follow you on Instagram immediately. And of course, we'll be promoting this episode on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram once it comes out. So we'll be sure to tag food.ee at all of their social medias. Hey, again, Ryan, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your journey and your advice. It's awesome.
Thanks for having me, Tom. That was a lot of fun.
And thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened. I say it every show. If it wasn't for the audience, why would we do this? Most people find the show from word of mouth. So if you like the show, tell a friend. Do me a favor, subscribe on iTunes. We've cracked back into the top 200 career-oriented podcasts, and that's because of listeners like you subscribing. They rank that stuff on new subscriptions. So walk around your office, make everybody with an iPhone subscribe on iTunes, and help give us a little bit of boost. If you like the show, ping me on all the social medias. I'm Tom Singer, THOMSINGER, and you can always find me at my website, tomsinger.com. Hey, we're going to be back in a couple of days with an interview with somebody just as cool as Ryan Spong. But in the meantime, go out there and do something. Try something new. And while you're at it, have a great day.
Thank you for being part of the Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do podcast. Without your participation and listening to these conversations, there is no show. Connect with Tom at tomsinger.com and follow him on Twitter at tomsinger.